Hi, I'm Ralph Preston. Welcome to our Tuesday Stroke Buddy support group meetings. Today we have Shannon Cobb with us, and she's a physical therapist who does a lot of work with stroke survivors, and she's also into exercise and yoga and a number of other things. And I think it's always best for me to let the guests talk for themselves. So Shannon, why don't you tell us a little bit about what drew you to PT, a little bit about your practice, and some of the things that you do to get us started, and then we'll talk about the classes you have going on.
All right, no problem. I was in physical therapy in high school because I tore my ACL, and so that was my personal exposure to it. In college, I finally had to decide what I was going to do and had been taking like a science and biology track. So I said, "Hey, I'll do physical therapy," and it took me two tries to get into PT school. So I went to PT school at the University of Miami in Florida. And while I was in school, I just became, although my exposure to therapy was orthopedic, bones and muscles and all of that, I was really interested in neurologic physical therapy. And after school, managed to get a job at a rehab hospital and in Charleston, actually, and worked primarily, my caseload was primarily stroke survivors. And honestly, at that time, what I realize now is I didn't have the skill set to help people, but I sort of had gotten to feel like, well, after you have a stroke, you're as good as you're going to get, and that's it. And I'm embarrassed to say I was a therapist and I felt that way. But I was sent by my employer for continuing education training that they wanted folks in the facility to have. And that was it's a big mouthful, neurointegrative functional rehabilitation and habilitation approach. So the acronym is NeuroIFRA, and was lucky enough to be in a course that was taught by the person who originated the approach. And I saw he was able to make all these wonderful changes and help people achieve way more than I actually thought was possible. So I sort of turned my ship around. I have been a physical therapist for 20 years. Most of that time has been working with stroke survivors. I have had over 400 hours of training in the NeuroIFRA approach. And right now, I have a business where we offer therapy and fitness for older adults, people with Parkinson's disease, and stroke survivors. And so around this kind of the exercise piece, to sort of talk a little bit about that, I teamed up with a therapist for my in-person business who was real passionate about helping people with Parkinson's disease. And so a piece of what we did was start Parkinson's fitness classes. And kind of being a partner to it, I had to learn a little bit more about Parkinson's disease and what is kind of going on out there in the research community and kind of where is all that going for Parkinson's disease. And I don't know if you all are familiar, but around where I live, there are actually a lot of community options that are specific for people with Parkinson's disease to be able to exercise. There's a lot of research and more research coming out, like in this period of time, about exercise and Parkinson's disease. And I think that's awesome. But my passion is helping stroke survivors. And I thought to myself, there actually is research about how fitness and exercise is beneficial for stroke survivors. But we don't have like I don't think that information is put into use very well, very effectively. So I've kind of taken the leap to make that piece a little more accessible to people. And so the reason is, if we think about exercise just for human beings, right, like all people, we know that there are recommendations for what we should be getting as adults in terms of our physical activity. So the World Health Organization has recommended between 150 to 300 minutes per week of moderate intensity exercise. And that's including two 2 strength training sessions per week that we all should be getting as adults. And that is even including adults with disability. If you kind of Google into the World Health Organization and what their recommendations are, it's the same for all adults. And so the reasons for that, there are quotes out there about how if exercise were a pill, it'd be the most prescribed medication that doctors would be writing prescriptions out for. And that's because it has so many positive effects on a variety of aspects of our overall health. So some areas that we know that it has positive effects on depression. Exercise helps get sort of those feel-good chemicals that our brain produces going. It helps our brain produce those chemicals so it can have a positive effect on people who are experiencing depression. It also helps improve quality and duration of sleep. So people who have sleep issues, once they start getting regular exercise, find positive benefits and less difficulty with their sleep issues. In terms of fatigue, it seems counterintuitive, but exercise actually helps reduce fatigue. So starting a program of regular exercise in a way that doesn't exacerbate fatigue and that you can maintain actually helps folks who are experiencing problems with fatigue reduce those issues. Exercise has positive effects for our bone density. So bone density is just how sturdy our bones are, and performing exercise, and specifically resistance exercise, helps improve bone density, which reduces our likelihood of a fracture or a break if we have some sort of fall or accident. Exercise helps with stress management. It helps with issues related to diabetes, high blood pressure, weight control. So that's just, and that's not all an entire list of things that in terms of our overall health that exercise helps with, but they were things that I thought were important and are overlap with things that are issues for folks who are stroke survivors. And because stroke survivors or adult stroke survivors are people, they're going to get those same benefits out of a regular exercise program. The other piece of that is that there's also research that's out there that shows that fitness and general exercise can have a positive effect on aspects related to improvement after stroke. So the body of literature, like in studies that are out there, isn't quite as robust as it is for Parkinson's disease, but it's growing. And so if we look at specific benefits for a person who's a stroke survivor who would be participating in fitness type of exercise, as opposed to like stroke impairment improvement exercise, like getting my arm or my leg better. So for overall fitness, one thing that this type of exercise can do is increase, again, good chemicals in our brains. And one of those is called brain-derived neurotrophic chemical. So that's BDNF. And that is a chemical that helps with neuroplasticity. So if it's neurotrophic, neuro means nerves, trophic means growth. So that chemical is a piece of the whole chemical process that helps with neuroplasticity. So engaging in exercise can help get that particular chemical flowing around in your brain. And as a stroke survivor, most generally, you would be interested in neuroplasticity since that stroke took place in your brain. You're trying to make positive changes in your brain to make improvements after your stroke. So having more of that BDNF moving around in your brain is going to be helpful for you to make those changes. So in terms of looking at exercise specifically as a help toward, say, those activities that you're engaging in to improve after your stroke. So you have a home program your therapist has given you, you're doing maybe cognitive training, visual scanning training, any of those particular what I call impairment exercises, working on the thing that is you're having trouble with as a result of your stroke. So there's studies that have shown, that if you perform 15 to 20 minutes of vigorous exercise before you do that task specific exercise, so whatever that home program might be, and doing that 15 to 20 minutes of exercise prior helps improve your ability to perform that particular task that you're going to be practicing. So it improves task performance if you do it directly after that 15 to 20 minute kind of aerobic workout, that more moderate to vigorous intensity workout. So you could do a brief bout of exercise before you do your home program to boost your ability to be able to be better at that. On the flip side of that, there are also studies that show that performing an exercise bout 15 to 20 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity exercise after, say, that task specific exercise program helps what they call consolidate that whatever that task was you were working on, meaning it helps it stick in there a little bit better so that when you come around to that task the next time, it helps with that improvement of being able to kind of pick up where you left off. That's the best way I can sort of describe consolidation. So if we think about, and I will say in my practice as a physical therapist, I have not been great about encouraging people to utilize general fitness physical activity to enhance what they're doing to work on to improve their impairments. And so I'm getting better at that. But I think that the reason is that it can be difficult for people to engage in any kind of fitness activity. And we can't, of course, you all will know that we can't kind of lump stroke survivors into one sort of description. Our brain's so complex, people can have small to large effects in different parts of their brains. So the way that a person is affected by their stroke is going to look kind of widely varying. But, and so then that's going to make a person's ability to participate in like a general fitness program and physical activity, obviously widely varying. And so what I find is that folks who have more options, meaning that if your impairments are less as a result of your stroke, or you've come along in your improvement to the point that your impairments are less, you've got a lot more options available to you to be able to go out and participate in an exercise program. You may be able to get yourself there more easily. Maybe you've gotten back to driving and you're able to do that. You may be able to participate in a community exercise program or get to the gym and use the equipment a lot more easily. And that's great. And so for those folks, I think there's a lot of options out there. However, we know that stroke survivors kind of tend to be along a spectrum. And so on the flip side of it, the more you have, the easier it is to find options. The less you have going on, the harder it is to find options. But that doesn't mean that fitness isn't appropriate for people just because they're not moving as easily as someone else. And so the reason that So looking at kind of an online fitness option, which is what I'm doing with this 28-day challenge, really is about creating options for the folks that fall kind of on the other, moving towards the other end of the spectrum of not having as many options to get out there and engage in a fitness program. And doing it online, I feel like really helps the piece of, for a lot of folks, maybe they could participate in a community exercise program or use some equipment at a gym, but it requires the help of another person to get them there. And so that really does increase the burden of engaging in regular activity. So I really feel like an online option for folks helps make it easier and reduce the burden. And if we can make a program that helps meet people where they are in relation to their impairments from their stroke, even better. The thing about online, though, is like there is, like we were talking about YouTube before we started this recording, there are all sorts of videos out there, and there are videos for exercise programs that you could sort through and try to find what's going to work for you, or watch a program and try to modify it for yourself. But I know personally, and that trying to go through that and do that for yourself is another layer of difficulty and a barrier to being consistent with sticking with a program. And I know personally and through research that the less barriers that we make towards engaging in something on a regular basis, especially exercise, less barriers we can have there, the more likely we are to be able to do it on a regular basis. And so if there's an online program that is designed for somebody who's a stroke survivor, then you don't have to think about, well, is this going to work, or how am I going to have to modify it? It's going to be a little more tailored and served up, so it makes it easier to do your thing more regularly, on a more regular basis. And then by doing that, you have that general fitness piece layered onto any program that you're trying to do specific for your impairments for your stroke. And those two can kind of combine to boost the effectiveness of the work that you're trying to do, improving after your stroke. In addition to getting all those awesome benefits that we said at the beginning are available to you because you participate in regular exercise. So I've just committed myself to trying to provide an online option for stroke survivors that's specific for stroke survivors, that has sort of at least a variety of levels of participation, so that it makes it easier to figure out kind of how to get going and how you can participate in an exercise program, and kind of growing what that program is to incorporate not only cardio and strength, which is really the two things this 28-day challenge is all about, but also promote improved and flexibility, and also provide some of those impairment specific exercises that I know from my experience, lots of people have to deal with and work through. So what's next for Thrive Stroke, since I'm kind of getting this off the ground, is first of all, if anyone's joined us for this 28-day challenge, my camera died right before I decided I was going to do this. So I had an online setup, and so the video's not that great. So we're going to upgrade our tech as we kind of move forward. And we're also going to expand our fitness offerings, and again, add in some impairment specific exercise education and classes to help with some of those specific things we know stroke survivors are dealing with. But I'm also going to bring on, I know lots of knowledgeable people who work with stroke survivors. I have my particular area that I have a lot of experience in, but I don't know everything. And there's a lot of things that I know stroke survivors have questions about. And I know lots of folks who are out there who are colleagues of mine who would be able to answer those questions better than me. So there's also going to be an education component to what Thrive Stroke has to offer. So here in the next 3 weeks, you guys can be looking for another little announcement from me about what that's going to be looking like going forward. But as we talk today, we've got, we're on week 2 of our 28-day challenge and this week is going to be all about strength training in our classes.
Well, I'd just like to say I've taken your classes and they're very good. And you're right in the sense that if you look for something that has been adapted already, you're going to be better off. But I will tell you that you do, as someone who hasn't experienced a stroke, you do a better job of adapting than some of the other ones that I've seen.
Okay.
So
that's good to know.
Yeah, and I'm a video professional. I didn't notice anything about your camera.
Okay, good.
I mean, it was your standard, chair in the corner of the wall with that bar
Yeah.
over there. So I think it's right there with the light switch and the
Oh
bar.
yeah, I'm in the same place. I know it
Right.
has a little bit of a hostage aspect to it. So we're going to try to
Well, it's
make it
like
a little bit more interesting.
I'm a video guy and I try and make everything visually interesting and stuff. But at some point, if they're like, picking on like the shot, they're not paying attention to the message, or in your case,
Sure.
the videos. And this is a very interesting subject because it's kind of like mental health. It's often overlooked by stroke survivors. I was thinking about it while you were talking, and I'm thinking, well, maybe that's because they're so darn focused on getting better well, of course, there's the wheelchair aspect, and one of the first things that we always did with the patients that we were stroke survivors that we were working with was if they weren't walking and such, we'd get them down on the mats to do mat work, crawling and core work, and stuff that you do. I'm sure real basic stuff if they're not there yet. So you tell people to, get down on the mat and do this and that. Oh, I can't get down on the mat. Well, I can get down, but I can't get back in the wheelchair. So it's tough for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's pretty difficult to get aerobic in a wheelchair. I mean,
It is difficult, but it's not impossible. And that is that piece of when
interesting.
somebody has less, like what can we do? And for that person who, like you're talking about, well, I can get to the mat, but I can't get back. So making improvements in just your general physical like well-being does help contribute to your ability to work, like to be able to accomplish those things that are difficult at that stage of your improvement. And so yeah, like that's my deal. I know the people who have less, there's less opportunity, so you have to contrive that opportunity, whether it's in the particular exercises for improvement after your stroke or in this general fitness piece. And so I've kind of committed myself to that piece of it.
I would tell them to try, because I found success builds on success, and if you're not
Exactly.
trying, you're not going to have any success. The other thing is you just might surprise yourself, and if you're trying to get down that path of recovery, you may as well take whatever steps you can. It's interesting because Dr. Hetzler is a big believer in BDNF. He calls it miracle grow for the brain. So I could see him when you were talking about that. I could see him nodding his head and in complete agreement. With
Again,
our,
not an expert at when we're
no,
talking
I'm not.
about those things, but
Absolutely. If I could just make two comments here. First of all, my prior primary care physician had a sign in his office that said, exercise is the answer to everything.
it's
And
pretty true. Yeah.
yeah. Secondly, I was very interested when you talked about research showing that general exercise tends to make the specific exercise for stroke recovery better.
Hmm.
It's like the more general exercise primes the brain, so it's
That
more
is exactly
receptive.
what, yeah. So it actually comes, so that information is out of an article that is about brain priming, as a matter of fact.
Ah,
And so, looking at, it's not the only kind of brain priming there is, but there is the use of that aerobic exercise as a brain primer.
ah,
It made more sense to me before, but as I thought about it, it makes sense after too, because I was told that after you do intentional recovery type exercises, that your brain continues to make connections. I heard 5-10 minutes, I heard 15-20 minutes. I used to work, I was kind of a maniac. I did like 15 minutes on, 10 minutes off, and I'd go lay like King Tut on my bed and never go to sleep, but I'd put my hands on my thighs and just lay there and let my brain reconnect. And if I'd known this, what I could have done was, gone and done some push-ups or, or run in place or something. But it does make sense. I mean, I think people can jump to the fact that you could jumpstart your brain. I think that's an easy one for them. I think it's a little harder to understand this concept of once you get your brain going,
Right.
that he continues to make, it's what a friend of mine, William Lowe, calls a blueprint. It's very similar. Dr. Hetzler has different technology for it, but your brain has certain ways of making, being imprinted, being primed. Making a blueprint is the end result of the priming and doing the things right. So, you know, like you, we've taken a real turn towards the educational component because we really feel like, you know, presentations like you're giving today and the ones Dr. Hetzler gave us all enable us to be more effective in terms of focusing on our recovery. And I think in anything you do, not just recovery, the more focused approach you take, the more likely you are to have better results. I mean,
Sure, I would agree.
it's not brain science. Ah,
Yeah.
Yes, it
brain
is.
surgery
I was going
is
to say,
rocket
oh, yes,
science.
it is.
Yeah, it is. And the saying is rocket science and brain surgery. So
That's
I just
right. You like
mashed
to combine
together.
them.
So, is there such a thing? Have you thought about or are you doing? I know there's a Parkinson's circuit. As stroke survivors, we sometimes kind of feel like the stepchild. You know, everybody has a heart attack and they have heart attack clubs. I lived in a town of 20,000 people and they had a heart attack club at the hospital. They went for classes, the gym participated. They had walks on the greenway, they had programs at the gym. And we're all here going, well, what's wrong with us? Are we green or something? You
Oh,
know,
yes.
there seems to be a lot more recovery options for heart attacks and cancer and Parkinson's. So you talk about all this great Parkinson's stuff, and we start to feel like the stepchild again.
Oh, believe me, that's why I'm doing this, because it's frustrating to me. But I think that a piece of it really relates to the mobility level of folks who fall into those categories like you named off. So heart attack and heart surgery survivors, people with cancer, people with Parkinson's disease. Now, there's a large portion of all of those people who can get out somewhere pretty easy, who could use a piece of equipment, who don't require an individual monitoring the program that's like
Right.
highly medical, right? Like, so a lot of the Parkinson's programs that are out there now are led by a trainer and exercise physiologist versus like a medical professional. And so I think that's a piece of it. I mean, I have found and which is another reason that I'm very drawn to the virtual piece of this, is that a lot of stroke survivors are, I don't know that hidden is the word, they're out there, but it's hard to get places. It's hard to get to, like I said, I have a bricks and mortar business. It's hard for folks to find options that are outside of a hospital system.
Plus, I think we have a larger component of self-shame than heart attack and cancer folks. A lot of stroke survivors don't want to be seen, with a gimpy arm and a limp. I've always wanted to have something. I just came up with the concept. I guess I was helping to put on a stroke survivor convention, and we had in the morning, they had like a 15-minute like move warm-up thing to kick off the day. I always thought it'd be great to have a program just like Stroke Move is what I called it. Just a place where, say you had a gym, a place where people, you could either hold it at 10 o'clock or let people drop by and just get them moving. Because I think any kind of movement helps with stroke recovery, because even if it's not focused on specific areas, you're still going through various range of motions. And in some physical activities, you're combining a number of range of motion activities to do them. So I know that there's Parkinson's circuits. I'm thinking about my idea of Stroke Move and wondering if you're working on or already have something like some kind of a stroke circuit.
So explain a little more about what you're thinking about when you say stroke circuit.
Well, what's a Parkinson's circuit? I mean, from what I've seen, observed them. I actually thought about going and talking to some of those people and seeing if it applied to stroke, but a conversation that you and I had privately kind of dissuaded me from that because of the spasticity issue and some others. But it's my understanding, like in a circuit thing, you
Hello?
do something for 5 minutes and say you have,
Hello?
it's an hour long, you have 12 different stations, you do each one for 5 minutes and everybody rotates around.
So yeah,
Hello?
again, like what I have found is that, so a circuit is great. I have a class, actually a Parkinson's circuit class that's running in this building right now. So we really love that style of a workout because you can focus on a variety of different aspects of exercise and kind of diagnose a specific exercise in that way. It keeps it interesting. And so yeah, I love, you can easily do a circuit. So tradition, like actually that's how I'm setting up this 28-day challenge. The exercises are in a circuit, right? But it's just in a circuit of a particular activity versus moving around a room to different stations. We just do a circuit of a variety of exercises in different ways that are a challenge for time, for repetition. But yeah, I think that any type of exercise could be modified for the stroke survivor. What you get into, if it's an in-person kind of thing, is to be able to create. So the classes that we have for the people with Parkinson's, they're sort of stratified in level of ability to participate and level of challenge, level of cognition, level of anxiety. Those are some things that are issues. So you have to kind of stratify those classes. So you get a group of people who can participate sort of in general at the same level and be able to be monitored by, by one person, so that if somebody needs a lot of help, then you got to have a smaller class and different activities than you might have in a class that's a little bit more mobile and agile.
Yeah, the circuit just takes place in that corner behind your chair.
That's right. We just circuit through different activities versus different stations. But yeah, that is exactly it.
If I could comment for a minute,
Sure.
Ralph, you were talking about differences in Parkinson's and stroke survivors. One major difference, I think, is that in Parkinson's disease, it results from damage to one particular part of the brain, the nigrostriatal dopamine pathway. But with stroke, you can have a stroke anywhere in the brain. It can affect sensory, motor, cognition, whatever. So it might be a little harder to bring all the stroke patients together in contrast to the Parkinson's ones, because although they will have different levels
Right.
of motor problems, it ultimately results from damage to one particular pathway in the brain.
Right. They're all working on the same issue, whereas stroke
Yeah.
survivors can have a variety of issues.
Right.
Well, I found that I have found in just my experience, I don't really feel like I haven't had any cognitive issues with my stroke, and I've recovered fairly well. Maybe it's because I'm a guy. I'm like, in aerobics class, I'm that guy in the back that's always doing one more after all the women have switched over to something else. And then it takes me 3 of them to get in sync with what they're doing. And then I just get it and I'm doing one more and there they switched again. So it may be a disability due to my gender. But I've always found that it's really hard in both yoga class and exercise class to be adapting on the fly. That's why I think, Shannon, something like what you're doing is so important because, well, first of all, I mean, I'm functioning at a reasonably high level, both physically and mentally, and I'm having trouble with this. So if you're having trouble mentally, short-term memory, physically, you're focusing a lot of your brain on your movement. You don't have all this extra, as stroke survivors, we don't have all this like extra brain floating around. We're trying to retrain parts of our brain to take over for the dead parts, basically.
Sure.
So I think that I would suggest to stroke survivors that they look for something already adapted. That's one reason why in another one of these programs we brought the concept of adaptive yoga to people. And Winnie and I do it with my sister-in-law every Sunday morning and found it very beneficial. I'd be curious about, I noticed that you guys, either you or your bricks and mortar, your partners teach yoga. Be curious what you think about the benefits of yoga for stroke recovery, because I found all of the stretching just to be amazingly beneficial. We're doing it in a chair most of the time, but you're getting stretches that you're not really aware of. For
I
example, I
yeah,
couldn't.
I love any exercise that gets like your middle moving. So for a lot of folks, and again, my tendency is to think about the folks who kind of have less, right? Who aren't moving as well, tend to be very not stiff, but not super mobile, kind of in the middle, like our trunk, right? And so if we're thinking about our arms and how we're walking on our legs, they're attached to this trunk. And so improving mobility and control in that piece is a really big, in my opinion, is a really big help to actually help improve arm function, because some of the stiffnesses that we feel, everything's connected, right? Like, so if you're not moving well through your middle, and so engaging in, say, like a yoga class gives you an opportunity to move your body in ways that you may not get an opportunity to, like in your daily life. And so you're gaining range of motions, the sensation of that, putting your head and your body in different positions is just good for kind of your awareness of where you are in space and getting that different experience. So yeah, I love, love. And yes, so one of the therapists that I work with is also a certified yoga instructor. So yeah, I think yoga is awesome. And it's like you said, you know, yoga kind of, people have a thought in their mind of what that looks like, but for somebody who's a stroke survivor, it needs to be changed up, and it needs to be inviting to where it may not look exactly like the pose, right? But if you're doing an adaptive version of that, that's awesome, right? Yeah.
Warriors
So I
on
really love
here.
it. Yeah, I really love it.
Well, the other thing I think it brings, makes you more aware of is mindfulness, um, getting away. I refer to getting away as yoga, like yard yoga or art yoga or whatever.
Okay.
Spacing out, leaving the rest of the world behind you. And the breathing aspect, I think,
Yes.
because over the last year, I thought I knew how to diaphragm breathe and, breathe from your core.
Hmm.
And I kind of did, but I've gotten a lot better at it just taking a class every week. The other thing is I'm glad to see you talk about core, because I think core is not underrated. I don't think they teach us enough about the importance of core. There's a question that goes around all the stroke groups, and it goes like this. So, if you could get in a time capsule and go back to 6 weeks or 6 months after you had your stroke, and you step out of this time capsule, and there you are standing 6 weeks or 6 months after your stroke, what would you say to yourself to help yourself with your recovery? And my answer has always been the importance of core, because when you're trying to get your arm, like, just, well, put your arm up over your head and go this way like in a yoga move. All of a sudden, when you get far enough, you can feel your scapula moving. Well, that's one of the things that you really have to get control over to um, undo a subluxed shoulder. So I don't know. I can't say.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, so all those parts are attached. So simply by moving your middle, right? Like I call it your trunk. I don't necessarily focus specifically about saying that it's your core, but like moving your middle, your shoulder blade rests on your rib cage. So when you move your body, you're by way of doing that, you're mobilizing your scapula just from doing that. So you're getting your shoulder blade moving in different directions. So that's a piece that can help with that mobility to improve that function in that upper extremity. I agree.
Well, and I think that as I got better and better, I realized that as I got rid of my drop foot, I realized it wasn't just ankle and knee and upper leg strength. It went right to the hip, and it goes right to the core, to the transverse abdominal muscles. Okay, the middle. Let's call it the middle, the trunk. And yeah, a lot of people are real hesitant because to do things like we were talking about getting down on the floor and getting back up. That stuff's hard to do if you have a weak trunk or middle.
Mm-hmm.
You rely on, you wouldn't believe, if you've ever, okay, I broke my shoulder and hand one time in a triathlon bicycle accident. You can't get out of bed without your core and without your arm and shoulder. You can't do it.
Sure.
I finally learned how to scoot over to the edge and roll off onto my feet and stand up quick, so I didn't have the pain. But your core is just connected to everything.
Mm-hmm.
I
I
worked with
agree.
I worked with a gal who had ataxia, and she'd put her hands up. We built up her core. It took about a year, her middle. And it took about a year. In the beginning, she'd put her arms up, and because she had ataxia and they'd flail around a little bit, it would come right back down her arm into that weak middle and move her trunk around. Also dealing with the same issue with another stroke survivor at the moment who also has ataxia. They'll tell you can't do anything about it, but I'm here to tell you that after a year of doing core work with Kelly, she would put her arm up and it would move, but it moved less, number one,
Mm-hmm.
and it did not come back down into her core because we built up her middle strength.
Sure. Yeah. No, there's definitely things that you can do to help people with ataxia. I would agree with you on that as well.
Well, the neurologists don't. So
that's a whole nother.
Yeah, I know. We won't go there. I took her to her neurologist and I asked him once. I took her about 6 more times and I just kept it zipped. I never told him that we'd, pretty much gotten rid of the ataxia. I didn't think he'd believe it.
Mm-hmm.
But based on what he said to me, the fact that it was impossible. So anyway, that's a whole nother battle, getting the whole medical system to stop telling us that we're only going to get better for 6 months and ataxia is impossible and everything. They don't factor in the human spirit.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've seen some of that, probably,
for
human
sure.
spirit with your patients.
Definitely.
Speaking of patients, what do you how do you like to? I kind of preach this thing that you need to establish a rapport and get homework going, and the better relationship you can have with your physical therapist, the more information you're going to pass back and forth, and it's going to help with your recovery. What do you like to see your stroke survivor patients do in terms of interacting with you, in terms of homework or attitude, or do you see a difference between the ones who come in and go, I'm here, make me better, and the ones who come in and say, I'm here to get better, can you give me some homework and I'll do it and I'll come back and show you I can do it?
Right. Well, I think that's pretty obvious, the difference between those two people and what their process might look like. But so yeah, I think in terms of working with somebody one-on-one who's a stroke survivor, anybody who has that initial vested interest, they have goals or a goal that they want to achieve and are interested in what are the steps to do that, like what does that look like, and giving me feedback about any homework that that I've given them helps the process go a whole lot better, as opposed to that person who's like the make me better person. I can't make anybody who's a stroke survivor better. I can only do as much as I can in an hour and try to provide whatever, 2 hours a week versus however many hours are left in that week for somebody to make improvement. And I'm sure you all talk about this, the repetition and the consistency is what it's going to take to make a change. And that doesn't happen in 2 hours of therapy in a week.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because that's another thing we preach. Because a lot of the "I'm here, make me better" people seem to think, well, they haven't taken ownership or responsibility for their recovery. And I tell people that the therapist is sort of like a piano teacher. And if you don't do your homework, then you're going to be embarrassed when the piano teacher comes back around next week and you aren't any better. And the piano teacher is going to know, just like the physical therapist knows. I'm sure you know whether people do their homework or not.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. Yeah. Because you're going to, if you're doing some of that homework, there's going to be some change in the direction that we're headed with that homework. And the only way to tweak it, like that's the other piece of improvement after stroke, is that you have to keep changing that input so that you keep moving in that positive direction. And so you want to be able to have some good feedback to tweak that home program for that next little step and that next little step. And so if that next little step didn't occur, then something's going on there for the most part.
Well, another thing I'd written down to talk about, and you just introduced it, is basically, to keep it going and not flatten out and plateau. Because I think this is something that stroke survivors don't understand the importance of. I'm not sure that stroke survivors understand that a physical therapist is operating, I believe they understand this part, that they're operating under the rules of the insurance company. However, those rules are not loosely defined, but the definition isn't, sharp as a tack either.
No,
That
that is
most
true.
people don't realize that a physical therapist has some latitude in whether or not they graduate you or keep you. And so that's why I think it's important to establish a good relationship, because if you're getting along with them and you're doing your work, they're going to keep you longer. And that's your goal at therapy. I mean, when we go to therapy, if you're not thinking about, doing what you need to do to not get kicked out by the insurance company, you're missing a piece of it. I mean, it's a sad commentary on our world that I should have to say that, but it's actually, unfortunately, true.
Mm-hmm.
What do you
It is
do
true.
to with your patients? What are your thoughts on plateauing and mixing it up to keep that curve going up?
Well, first of all, I would say what I have learned being doing this for so long is that there are times where the plateau is not in the person that I'm working with, but it's in my skill set. And so I've worked really hard to be able to notice that, and then to be able to have a network of individuals who I know maybe have a skill set outside of mine to make a referral to, um, or to problem solve with. And so I think that depending on where a person is and who they're working with, considering what your therapist's skill level and knowledge level is, if that progress is slowing or you're not seeing, you're hitting that plateau, like we're human beings who don't have every answer to every problem. And so I have to be humble and say, I don't always know the next best thing for somebody. And so if they're not improving, it may not be because of them, it may be because of me. The other piece is that people are experiencing, I mean, like, you're a human being with a life and things going on during this improvement process, and there are just things that get in the way sometimes of that improvement, and those are emotional. We talked about that emotional piece, a death in the family, someone loses a job, like those things can cause plateaus, because you just can't, like you said, you only have so much brain power to focus on something. And it might, if your emotions and your brain power are focused on some other aspect of your life, that's going to inhibit your improvement, but only because that's going on. And so I do feel like there are external forces, I guess, that can cause those plateaus. And again, I'm kind of air quoting everything, but that just means you need to be able to step back and maybe for some folks, deal with whatever that piece is. And then when you come back to work on that improvement again, I mean, I've had plenty of people who are in that situation, and then shoo, that improvement comes back when they kind of have have a lid on or able to manage whatever that other piece is going on in their life. So I think that those plateaus, and sometimes there's just the endurance, I think. I mean, I am not a stroke survivor. I've only gotten a chance to work with folks, but there's an endurance to keep, plugging away at it. And sometimes you just need like a therapeutic rest break where you're not, where you give yourself a chance to sort of regroup and then come back at it. And so I feel like those are kind of other times that I see that so-called plateau where it's just related to something else. And it's not that the potential for improvement isn't there. It's that there are barriers that kind of need to be addressed before you come back and start heading in that direction again.
If I could just make a comment about plateaus, there are plateaus in all sorts of things. For example, if you're learning to play a musical instrument like the piano or guitar, you'll initially make rapid strides and improve, but you'll reach a point where you don't seem to be getting any better. And a plateau, you just have to put in a lot of extra work or change the song you're trying to play or something. So it's not just in stroke recovery that there's this dreaded plateau, but there are plateaus in all sorts of things in life. And you just have to put in more effort to do it. Also, in a therapy session, the therapist more or less teaches you what you should be doing, but there's no way enough time in that session for you to make strides. It's up to your own time in the days when you're not in therapy to put in the time and effort to produce the neuroplasticity.
I agree. Those are great points.
Yeah, and a couple of other good points. I appreciate that, Dr. Hetzler, because what I was going to do is kind of summarize what the takeaways are for our audience here. So I hear that they occur from both of you, that they just are naturally occurring. Sometimes they happen. There's not much you can do about it. You go on vacation, you have a death in the family, you lose your job or something. So one of the takeaways is, don't beat up on yourself. Do something about it. Another thing I heard was, and I'm not here to beat up on physical therapists. There are piano teachers. We love you and we need you very badly. However, I also think it's important that as a stroke survivor community, we try and share with the other survivors what's worked for us. And what I heard was, so being aware of it is number one, okay? If you know that you can plateau, you can be looking for it. If you don't know that, then all of a sudden you're going to be scratching your head 3 weeks into a plateau going, what's going on? I also heard you be very humble about saying that it's possible that you don't have the knowledge set. I'm not saying that therapists plateau you on purpose or anything,
No.
but it sounded to me like the thing that a stroke survivor should do at that point when they feel that way is talk to you about it. I mean, it seems to me that's the logical thing to do and that you would be open to it. And I see you shaking your head.
Yes.
So you would welcome, I would assume you welcome all kinds of conversations and feedback from the stroke survivor. The more involved they are, it seems to me, the better relationship you both are going to have.
For sure. And then those things that you bring up can help us think about things that maybe just we missed, like you didn't think about, oh, wait, there's that little piece that I haven't been addressing. Oh, well, I know how to address that. I'm glad they brought that up. We're human beings. we miss stuff. We sometimes need a little bit of oh yeah, that piece. We do need to work on that. I do need to give you some homework on that.
Right. Well, the other thing is, like Dr. Hetzler was saying, there's just not enough time in a 45-minute session to, do much other than say, learn the new chords you're going to learn to play this week, back to the piano teacher analogy. So if we don't go home and do our homework, well, first of all, if you don't do that, I have to wonder whether you're going to get, how much better you're going to get if you rely on physical therapy, because guess what? It's going to run out. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Sure.
So you may as well get involved in a home program right away. But also, if we don't bring the experiences that we are having at home back to you, you're missing all that because you're not seeing a lot of that, what Dr. Hetzel was talking about, those repetitions and those experiences that we're having at home on our own because you're not there. So it's really important that we're back to this, have a good relationship, because if you don't feel like if you feel like your physical therapist is going to bite your head off, then you're not going to feel like talking to them.
We won't bite your head off. So yes,
No,
all that communication is super important. I would agree.
well, sometimes you just get somebody who
Oh yeah.
doesn't get it.
Yeah, sure. I say we're like hairdressers and dentists and everyone else. Sometimes you just find one you just don't, in the South, we call it G-haw, right? Like that you just don't kind of fit with. And that's okay. I mean, like, I'm not for everybody. You know, maybe there's another therapist out there where you might be able to develop a better relationship just because of your personalities. And so, yeah, there's all sorts of those things that go into it. But just as therapists, we should be open to hear any feedback that our patients give us, for sure.
Well, yeah. So, anybody out there got any questions?
I have one.
Oh, hallelujah. Sorry.
What if you go to therapy and you don't really improve? Can the therapist kind of cut you off?
So in terms of improvement, you know, what I like, not, I don't like to, but the way that I describe it to the folks that I work with is there's actually three of us in that relationship and in that room when we're working. There's you and there's me. And then if you are using your insurance, there is your insurance. And so, and they are the ones that are paying the bill. So if you're talking about improvement, there are certain things that we have to be able to show the insurance company that you are moving forward. And so being able to document that is important if insurance is involved. And when you're talking about that improvement, what I tell my patients, we do sometimes get to the point where you are improving, but your insurance has an expectation of a pace of improvement based on what we're able to kind of document in terms of changes. And sometimes that pace of improvement doesn't meet the standard for insurance. And so those are times when, as therapists, we have to discharge somebody. But that's really in that specific situation of utilizing your insurance for therapy.
Well, but it's a real issue. I think it was 2 days ago, not yesterday. I saw a post from a guy who'd gotten released the second time. Said the first time he got released because he wasn't making any improvement. And he went home and started making some improvement, got back into therapy, and then they released him again because he was making improvement. And his post was about, well, which is it? You know, what do? I get released either way. I wish we could get I know that there are different rules and that they're kind of nebulous. You guys, that's why I made sure to let everybody know that it's another reason that your relationship with your PT is important, because in a sense they can keep, I've had somebody, I've talked to this about therapists kind of off the record, and I had somebody keep me for a while, and I had somebody else tell me how to have the doctor write the prescription so that the insurance company didn't come into play as quickly. That's real interesting. I also had a friend who had a neurologist who wrote prescriptions over and over and over again over a 3-year period and kept him in physical therapy full-time for 3 years just by the prescription writing. So what I'm trying to do is get people to understand that there's a little bit of latitude here, and some of it belongs with your physical therapist, so play nice. If you want to stick around. No, we should always play nice. But if you play nice and have a good relationship, you're also going to get, both of you are going to get a lot more out of that whole relationship. Anybody else got a question? Anything else you'd like to say, Shannon?
No, I just appreciate everyone's time and everything that you interjected. And like I said, so we're like, as we are right now, we still have 3 more weeks in our 28-day challenge. So I'll be hosting those and providing links to the workouts as well. So I just appreciate everybody's time.
Great. And I didn't say it earlier, but so I'll say it now. One of the things that I do, if anybody is watching this on YouTube and wants to know about this February challenge and how to get involved in the rest of it, I will be posting all of Shannon's information, all of her links, websites, emails, Facebook, and everything, so that if you're interested in joining us for the rest of the month, starting at 3:15 today, um, uh, then her information will be under the description on YouTube underneath this video. I always put contact information for people, so especially since Shannon's offering stuff that's beneficial to our community and that lots of people should be interested in, and I suspect are interested in. So there you have it, Shannon. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you guys. And I'm off to my next client. So
Okay.
talk to you later. Have a good day.
All right. Thank you.